Chapter 5. Completed.
After being repudiated again by her father, a fact that at first was a misfortune, became one of the most important periods of her life, being considered one of the dwarfs that have most influenced the history of Shanaris. The Black Gem Dynasty, The Blood of the Dorsal. Author, Pasquale Didiamant. Historians call it the Peace of Trasby. The negotiations to reach an agreement were not very long for what was such a bloody war. The conditions were simple. First, Ulbianor was leaving the territory of New Ulbianor that once again belonged to the Kingdom of Dememba. Second, the dwarves of the Dorsal definitively renounced the Red Mines and returned the other two mines conquered to the Kingdom of Dememba during the war. Third, the Kingdom of Sigia lost all the territories near the King Dasmir Canal and also lost the territories of the river basin that supplied water to the canal. They would now belong to the Kingdom of Dememba and extend up to 2 kilometers inland from the riverbank. Fourth, the members of the alliance agreed to pay compensation to the Dorsal League consisting of 1,000 gold bars each year as compensation for the damage caused by the war. The duration of the payment would be 5 years. Payment would be made in Dememba on each anniversary of the signing of the Treaty of Trasby. Fifth, the dwarves of the Ridge agreed to trade their iron and other minerals with all the kingdoms of the Dragon Ridge. The monopoly of Ulbianor ended. Sixth, for 5 years, hostages would be held by the 3 kingdoms of the White Leaf Alliance. They would be princes of the 3 kings. They would be under the care of the King of Dememba. They were the guarantee of the treaty. The town of Trasby was chosen for the signing of the treaty, where the 4 kings involved were. The King of Dememba would also sign as a representative of the rest of the kings and rulers of the League of the Dragon Ridge. It was a simple act and without any intention of humiliation for the defeated who had enough to accept the conditions of the treaty. When it came to deciding who would be the hostages to be handed over, King Broke Blackgem was offered to use his daughter Tanya, but the king disowned her. Besides, that idea offended him. He did not consider her as his daughter and gave another son as a hostage. In his own words, "That deformed and treacherous woman is not my daughter. If you want to do me a favor to kill her right now, it is the disgrace of the Black Gem lineage." It was hard, but no one among the dwarves on the ridge would forgive Tanya for surviving the Red Mines massacre, only her. They blamed her for the defeat. After all, she was cursed by Asbaroan's brand. That brought bad luck and that's why the Legion failed. Never again would a deformed man join Donka Adder's brothers, the king ordered after the defeat in the Iron War. Arian wrapped the dwarf in and they did not comply with her father's wishes. Gosberg decided that the dwarf would become part of the mercenary company and not stay under the lodging of the King of Dememba. In addition, her hostage brother and his entourage would continue to despise her, so the best thing to do was to get her out of there. In Almera she would be safer. Not only were the kings of the alliance in trouble because of the defeat in the Iron War, General Adrian de Puelho was also one of the victims. The 2 defeats, first in the assault on the royal palace and then the one suffered in the Battle of Ardor Hill. It was an opportunity that his adversaries within the Republic did not waste. The Senate considered him as the maximum culprit, since he was the main strategist in the 2 battles on behalf of the alliance. In the Senate they commented, how could one trust someone who had sacrificed the best legion in centuries of the Republic? They used against him the very words that the general had used in the pamphlets he published about his adventures in Dememba. The truth is that the casualties were substantial. Only less than a quarter of the initial members of the Golden Lion Legion returned to Sazala. And it was not the news that caused the most stir. On the return of the legionaries they learned of a fact that in the Republic was considered something worse than death. They had captured the standard of the Legion. Adrian had omitted the news in his report to the Senate. Now it was displayed as a trophy in the throne room of the Dememba Palace to the delight of King Dasmir. A blow to the Republic. An embassy should humiliate itself and request the return of the standard surely by paying a good amount of gold. In addition, on the other hand, rumors had reached the Republic of Sazala about his humiliating defeat by a mercenary of Orc blood and that Adrian only saved his life because the kings had surrendered just at that very moment. For the members of the Senate it was a shame. It was only alive because of the clemency of the victors. As if that were not enough, in addition to her face was forever deformed by the blow given by the half-orc. Now a lion-shaped scar could be seen on her right cheek, spoiling her beautiful face. Many senators at the request of the relatives of the dead legionaries had demanded his return to try him for incompetence, but Adrian had faithful and important contacts within the Senate. They managed to get him appointed ambassador to the court of Ulbianor, since he was there and taking advantage of the fact that the Republic needed to negotiate the purchase of a large sum of wheat and other raw materials. In the Senate they thought it best to use their good contacts with the court of Ulbianor. It wasn't much, now he was relegated to being a simple merchant, but at least he would buy time and be able to think of a plan before returning to the Republic and defending himself from his adversaries. Those who did return were the few legionnaires who survived. They came in search of glory and returned totally destroyed.
Adrian was in the apartments given by the Queen of Ulbianor to the ambassador of the Republic. In addition, he had the favor of the Queen. Her Majesty did not blame him for the defeat and defended him before the Senate of Caesala, which was a point in his favor to be appointed ambassador. Her Majesty's cousin, Countess Samela, lay in bed sleeping. She too bravely pleaded the general's cause. Although he loved Samra, Adrian thought it best never to be with just one woman. The Queen's cousin agreed to be second course, at least for the time being. He didn't care, within a week it would be another. The good thing about the Jewel of the South is that it was full of beautiful women. The newly appointed ambassador looked for a room where he could be alone and locked it. He knew very well the risks he ran in case he was discovered while performing the ritual, and he did not want to kill anyone. The orders were very clear: no witnesses. He opened the little wooden box painted black and took the stone out of it in the shape of a pinion. He put it inside his mouth, just under his tongue, and closed his eyes. From the first time she accepted to be part of society, the feeling when she closed her eyes was strange. He felt as if his insides were being torn out, and then he advanced through that white tunnel until he reached a palace without doors or windows, but that he could pass through its walls with tranquility. The last one arrived. The meeting had begun. The atmosphere was very heated. The defeat in the Iron War had been a hard blow, since their lord had promised them total victory. When he arrived, all eyes fell on him. As he was the last to be part of society, he was frowned upon by others for his lack of punctuality. But they hated him much more since he was one of the favorites of their lord, who was leaning on the throne with a gesture of weariness while listening to the laments of the vanquished. "We were promised the mines of Demember, and I have lost my best dwarfs. My people now do not trust their king. There are rumors of conspiracies about me. No one is going to plot against you, Black Gem King." The one who interceded over those who were complaining was King Reginald of Arcio, who had long been a prominent figure in society. "No, but I have lost a lot of my popularity with this war. Now we have to pay a big tribute to the League. That will feed my opponents." Queen Lantiana also complained, although with a tone of resignation. At that moment General Adrian bowed to his lord. "My lord, thank you for saving my life. I swear that I will serve you even more devotedly." Everyone was surprised by Adrian's words. For most it was a sign of how flattering an upstart the general was. However, these words made his divinity react for the first time in the entire meeting. Finally his darkness was incorporated on the throne, and he ended up sketching a half smile. "You see, that's the attitude." Then he cast an angry look at the two kings who were complaining bitterly. "Unlike the two of you, if you are kings it is because of my help. You should be grateful for that, not complain pitifully like little children. You have lost. You are idiots. The plan was perfectly designed, but there are forces that we were not able to neutralize. Idiots." His divinity finished the sentence by hitting one of the armrests of the throne, and that made everyone feel great pain in their guts. Everyone present screamed. There was silence in the room. King Reginald of Arcio retook command of the meeting. "It has indeed been a tough defeat with short-term consequences that we have to solve. But the important thing is to analyze the causes of failure. It was not the result of our incompetence or a betrayal of our cause. For if this were the case, none of you would be alive right now." Adrian was wounded in his pride. The battle plan was perfect. Perhaps not so much the use of cavalry on the right flank, everything was going well until that explosion. The priestess, she turned the tide of battle. His divinity raised an eyebrow. Reginaldo, seeing his lord's gesture, smiled. Arian, daughter of Enam and Madeira, priestess of the new cult of Elaban. He destroyed the Tower of White Robes in Tripulia. He freed the cursed from their curse and restored the triumph of Elaban to his temple, and now annihilates the Golden Lion Legion in the Battle of Burning Hill. Seated in one of the main places was the now Grand Master of the White Robes, Ferdinand de Boukii. We have 5 jewels of Elaban, she guards the other 2. It will be impossible to obtain them before the Great Conjunction. There are still 15 years to go before the Great Conjunction. With each passing day Arian has more power, he can annihilate legions. The Dwarf King moved a little closer to the dais. Not only her. In the Battle of the Blood Mines, my best legion with its general, who was my right-hand man, was annihilated. They say that drowned by a trap, a lie, a dwarf managed to save his life, and he told me about it before he died. Elaban himself killed each dwarf one by one. It is impossible to defeat the cursed god. His divinity turned his head to look at King Broke Blackgem, who took a few steps back. That dwarf was not the only survivor. King Broke lowered his head in embarrassment. Queen Lantiana also spoke again. You don't talk much about Aris. He carried out the strategy in the Black Castle that was impossible to take, and the tactic of the Order Hill. He set a trap for us in which, even if we took the hill, the battle was lost. Aris was the one who advised her father in the Black Empire's conquest of the elven kingdom of Tortanel. And he has the black sword of the king of the cursed city. He is the chosen one of the gods. It was the king of the elves of Bordalania who spoke. They had not forgotten that defeat. Ferdinand then took the floor to refer to another member of the company. The Kushmage is powerful. His fire dragon is a magnificent spell worthy of any Grand Maester, and he is not afraid to use it on the battlefields. King Reginald could not calm so many complaints from the participants in the meeting about the skill of the mercenaries, while his divinity listened attentively while putting his hand on his chin. It is impossible to defeat them and steal their jewels. They are too powerful. His divinity began to laugh at everyone's complaints and fears, which surprised his faithful devotees. Shut up, everyone! There was silence. True, Elaban is powerful, but he acts in the shadows. Arian is dangerous, but she has a weak spot. Aris is the chosen one of the gods, although he can be defeated, and Kush is an irrelevant secondary like all magicians, after all. As he said this, he turned his head to look at Ferdinand, who sat down when he was threatened. You can see defeat in the Iron War as a bad thing. I believe that, however, it is an opportunity. Victories make the ego grow. Our heroes have proven to have no rivals in Shanaris, so it's only natural that they don't refuse to act if it has to be saved. The Elf King smiled more calmly. We have woven a spider's web over them. The fly does not enter it except when it has the utmost confidence that it can get out. Soon you will receive instructions. Reginald continued his master's words. Rest assured, things are happening as planned. Soon the threat of Elaban, Arian, and Aris will be neutralized, and our master will be back in Shanaris, to our joy and happiness. Such was the conviction of these words that everyone was calmer. Except that a character who never spoke appeared in the middle of the stage. You are forgetting the most important of all. He was the Dark One, an immortal of the First Era. He was part of society from its beginnings. The oldest member of the society, he always attended the meetings, but never spoke to anyone. Some did not even notice his presence. Always hidden under his golden mask, faithful servant and essential for his return. His divinity paid attention. The words of the Dark One had to always be taken into account. Who do we forget? From the other half-orc, Agnoruk. Reginald smiled when he heard that name. That wretch almost cost him the throne and had wounded his most precious collaborator forever. That ragged. It's crazy. Agnoruk is the most dangerous of all. You must finish him off before anyone else," insisted the Dark One. "What you say is nonsense. He has shown nothing that makes us consider him a greater threat than the other three," Reginaldo replied. But the Dark One only spoke in the face of the divinity who gladly took on the challenge. "What do you know about him?" "The same as my lord." The divinity only smiled. "Agnoruk at a very young age killed the king of the vampires," commented the Dark One. "As you well know, the king of the vampires was crazy. He wanted to destroy Shanaris. Sooner or later someone would finish him off," replied the divinity. "Everything he has done has been thanks to Laban. He is not a threat," Ferdinand said smugly. The Dark One retreated backwards when he saw that his statement was denied by the rest. "You must finish him off, otherwise he will kill all of us gathered here," murmured the immortal, a disastrous prophecy. But no one paid attention to him anymore, although the name of the half-orc would be taken into account, but he was not the main threat. The Dark Man's words influenced General Adrian, who put his hand to his right cheek. He wanted revenge sooner rather than later. He calmed down in the meeting, knowing that his lord had a plan to take down the mercenaries who interfered with his machinations to obtain the jewels to bring Shanaris back and dominate the orb along with the members of society. "The meeting is over." Adrian opened his eyes and spat out the stone, putting it back in the box that he had to hide in a place of total trust. He would wait for the orders of society, but first he had to find out everything he could about the mercenaries and especially about the half-orc. The celebrations for the victory of the Fourth Iron War lasted for a month, an unmitigated triumph of the League of the Dragon Dorsal and especially of King Dasmir II, its main promoter. The king was generous with the status of New Olbiana. The area would be allowed a certain autonomy and no one was forced to leave the place. In reality, the territory lacked the slightest interest since the colonization of Olbiana had not been a success either. However, in what would now be the southern border of Demember, a certain agricultural industry with some potential had begun to flourish, and it was foolish to waste the good that was not the same. Had had the occupation of the area, and it had not been punished by the war. The kingdom of Demember had suffered great damage. Fortunately, the mines that had been occupied by the dwarfs could be operational again quickly, but it would take a year for the red mines to be at full capacity, and that would make a huge effort. In addition, its famous canal that supplied water to the royal palace had to be rebuilt. The population had also suffered during the year of war and the human losses were significant, but only with the first payment of the compensation that was made at the time of signing the peace was part of the damage already compensated. For those for whom the war had been a round business was for the mercenaries of the Company of the Blue Phoenix. The soldiery far exceeded the losses in the war, and they were also guaranteed by the king a third of the payment of tribute to Demember during the first 3 years. De Boek was beyond his joy, but it wasn't just that. Fame, the victory at the Red Mines, the victory at the Demember Palace, the resistance on Burning Hill. They had unequivocally defeated the Flaming Sword Company and the other mercenary companies of Almera, making it clear who was the best. She had in her ranks the priestess of the god Laban. She alone had finished off the Legion of the Golden Lion. Takush, the best combat mage in all of Shanaris. Gosberg, who had defeated the dwarfs at the Blood Mines, as he did 50 years ago with the same ploy. His second-in-command, Aris, had held out easily at Castle Black and had devised the strategy for the Battle of Burning Hill. The cousins of Aris were the best orc warriors of their generation. Sabu was itself a battalion of the best mercenaries. Kritus was the best crossbowman in the world. Loranthus was a competent and disciplined captain. Silkari was the best warrior he had seen in years, and she could make decisions on her own with confidence for her general. They were even fortunate to have a Kendali who was vital in organizing the liberation of Demeba's palace and Castle Black. A being capable of infiltrating and breaking through enemy lines without any problem. And lastly, Agnoruk, he certainly wasn't on people's lips, But he had been with Gosberg inside the blood mines and then participated in the liberation from the sieges. He also organized the defense of the northwestern frontier. He was key in organizing the march of the League's reinforcement army. It also killed Arisa's lieutenant, Almazayed Neckbreaker, and nearly killed General Adrian de Paulo. No mercenary or demember soldier under his command has fought with as much pride as when they were under his command. Always the first to stand guard, the first to march, the last to eat, and always the same as his men, he slept next to them. The name of each of them was known, and for a warrior who had never participated in a conventional war his performance was more than remarkable. But as he always seemed to seek discretion in the second row, his actions were admirable, but not as showy as those of his companions. De Boek was sure that if Agnoruk wanted to he could be the best warrior in all of Shanaris, but there was something about him that held him back. The veteran warrior was busy writing the general report on the Fourth Iron War for his personal archives. But he was interrupted by Loranthas. It was time to get ready for the gala dinner. King Dasmir too had spared no expense. He had invited all the leaders who made up the League of the Dragon Dorsal to celebrate the victory. At the call for the distribution of booty, most of the kings and rulers had come without hesitation. The only city that was more or less in acceptable condition was Kazmin, which was decked out to hold a great banquet. They all showed their best clothes. King Dasmir too, with his heir, his young son Dasmir and his favorite daughter, Princess Nazmarina. But the young woman could not inherit the throne of Demember despite the bravery she had shown in the war. The mercenaries were placed next to the king of Demember and were presented to the leaders of the League. All praise was focused on the fashionable couple Arian and Aris, along with their beautiful daughter Ariana. The dinner began with some pompous speeches that reproducing them would be tedious and very boring. At the end they celebrated the banquet enlivened by pleasant music. To finish, a dance was held to the sound of wonderful fireworks. At the table of the captains of the company there was a good atmosphere. Gosberg ate and drank for 7 as usual. Sabu had been arranged to fit her height quite and played with Ariana, who was accompanied by Anthra. Arian and Aris were caressing each other. They had spent a lot of time apart. Kush was talking to Kritus about the differences between the dwarfs of the hills and the dwarfs of the Dragon Ridge. Aris' cousins were drinking and eating quietly. Loranthas and Silkri were surprised since the Kendali had become invisible to them. While Agnoruk sipped some wine with an absent air, tonight the white moon reigned in the heavens. It was the end of summer, and Astabaran was shining in the sky. The half-orc could not help but remember again the story of his father, the chosen one of the gods. Suddenly he received a blow that made him come out of his reverie. His black eyes showed a tone of ferocity before his aggressor. That it was the dwarf Tanya, who was a good dwarf of the Dorsal, was already drunk, honoring the fame of her people when it came to drinking. Come on, half-orc. Is it a party, not a funeral? Tanya, you're already drunk. Ha ha ha, we have to celebrate Agnoruk, repudiated by my people and now hostage to you. You have to get drunk. The dwarf was too drunk to stand, so she fell face first to the ground. Arian rushed to sit her in a chair. What a drunkenness. All you need is... Agnoruk could not say anything more. The dwarf began to vomit what she had drunk and so she felt better. That made the half-orc stand up while the music sounded, indicating that a new dance was beginning. Let's go, Agnoruk. You owe me a dance. I'm sorry, I don't know how to dance. Come on, half-orc is Princess Nazmarina. Gosberg encouraged him. Thank you, but I'm not good at it. That way you will never find a partner. Kritus joked. Princess Nesmarina smiled mischievously. That's Agnoruk. I would like to see who conquered Queen Thara and Queen of the Amazons. Arian was wide-eyed. As always, Princess Nesmarina was aware of all the most delicious gossip that happened in Shanaris. Agnoruk didn't know that. It was a long time ago. I was there. The Queen of the Amazons begged him to lie with her. Gosberg. Agnoruk, he exclaimed angrily. Even Tanya opened her eyes. The Queen of the Amazons, For many she was considered the most beautiful woman in all of Shanaris. Rumors said that her only daughter was the result of the relationship of a foreigner who proved to be a worthy man for her. Those are just unfounded rumors. That never happened. Let's go. It's just a dance. Arian encouraged him. The little Denka pushed the half-orc into the center of the dance floor and was forced to dance alongside the princess, to the laughter of the others. If the truth is that the Queen of the Amazons saw him as her ideal partner, it would be because of how he fights, certainly not because of how he dances. Joked Aris. Come on, Agnoruk dances with a little more grace. Kritus stood up and stood on top of the chair, clapping to the music. What they caused was not an improvement in the dance technique, but that the half-orc threw a comb at them with his right hand to the laughter of everyone. The dinner lasted well into the night. Little by little almost all of them were falling. Even so, at dawn there were quite a few still standing. Oriana slept in the Kendali's arms, under Anthra's watchful eye. Aris was talking to her cousins and the commander of the forest of Fambir. Debok conversed quite drunkenly with King Dasmir, Gosberg, and Kush. Agnoruk as always had the ability to escape a little from the spotlight and was observing the sky. Princess Nazmarina was now dancing with Sebastian Darbikal, the governor of the Red Mines. They made a good couple. It seems that you were out of luck tonight, Agnoruk. You have to know how to lose. To lose, you first have to want to play. Agnoruk smiled at Arian, who sat down next to him. We will have to go to sleep. Oriana is already tired. That's right, we have to prepare for the return to Almera. As the Baron shines today like never before. As always, the priestess seemed to guess the half-orc's thoughts. They both resumed the conversation they had had in the half-orc's house about the chosen one of the gods. Yes, a warrior so strong and brave that the gods offered him to go up with them, but he refused. He only asked to die in combat against a worthy rival. Agnoruk repeated the legend again. As the Baron may already be with us. Agnoruk turned his head at Aris. He can without a doubt. He can't be, as the Baron has to be the son of a god. Well, then he has not yet been born. Arian smiled, at the same time the jewel shone a little. Thanks to her we won the battle. Commented the half-orc, observing the subtle bluish glow. I think I was hasty, we would have won the battle anyway in the long run. There was you, Gosberg, we could turn the situation around without me causing so much destruction. It was a mistake. Asked the half-orc, surprised. I remember your words not to draw attention to yourself. Now we have attracted attention, but I think I have no choice, Agnoruk. You don't have to save anyone, Arian. Shanaris has existed before you were born. Arian began to cry as he watched the moon begin to descend. I know who you are. The half-orc was silent. He knew, but no one had been told. It was a secret shared by his mother's priestesses, Gosberg and the Kendali. You are the son of the goddess of death, Thani. You are death reincarnated, that's why you harmed the Soul Eater. I felt it for the first time years ago in your first farewell, now I know it for sure. You are the son of a god. Agnoruk got up to get away a little. He was always running away from that fate, that's why he had retreated to the Mist Mountains. Arian, I don't want to be that. I have the impression that accepting who I am will bring misfortune to Shanaris. Agnoruk, Shanaris will follow when you leave. You will be what you have to be. I don't want to. It is to bring misfortune to everyone. It's no coincidence that we're both here, you remember. You yourself told me about it in Tripulia. Arian got up to follow Agnoruk, the half-orc walking nervously. It has nothing to do with it. You bring the light to Shanaris. You heal people. Arian stood in front of the half-orc to prevent his departure. At least once in his life he had to face his fate, he had to accept it. I, the light of Shanaris, have destroyed half a legion, Agnoruk. For everyone. When the time comes, Agnoruk, you will have to do whatever it takes, even if it means the misfortune of many. Arian was already speaking like Gosberg and the priestesses of the temple, with that tone of superiority that allowed them to decide the fate of others. Something that the half-orc hated, he carried enough deaths on his back to add many more. Necessary. You're the one who doesn't understand, in the end we're just toys in the hands of some capricious gods. Agnoruk gently pushed the priestess away as she began to walk towards the table where the rest of her companions were. You don't understand it and you should understand it, maybe one day you will, there's a lot more at stake than you think, Agnoruk. They were always with that story, the one about the greater good, but the cost didn't matter to them. Agnoruk had decided to turn the page. He paused to finish the conversation at once. I don't want to. Yes, I'll be Thani's son, but I'm not going to use that power to turn Shanaris upside down. I have 1 year left and when I finish it I will return to Vale Nevodo. And I warn you, don't look for me again. Agnoruk finished the sentence, the conversation was over, it was time to retire to his chambers, he was very angry. He started to walk to leave when suddenly he heard a phrase from Arian's mouth that left him cold. Matalos a todos. He stopped walking and looked at the priestess in amazement. He only remembered one phrase from his mother, only one, and that was one, kill them all. Arian approached Agnoruk and stroked the half-orc's black mane, just as he remembered his mother's caresses. This gesture seemed to calm the waters between the two. The half-orc calmed down. They didn't talk anymore, they both approached the table. Sabu took his adoptive father who was sleeping the monkey. Agnoruk did the same with the dwarf. Arian left with Aris and an Ariana who was crying a little. The girl was somewhat upset about being woken up, accompanied by Anthra. Meanwhile, Vanus accompanied Debok, who needed a little help walking. Aris' cousins closed the procession accompanied by Silkri and Loranthas and a few mercenaries who had stayed with them until the end of the party. Agnoruk let the dwarf sleep in his bed. The half-orc lay down on the floor. He knew that it would be difficult for him to sleep tonight. Every time he closed his eyes he remembered that rainy night in Vale Nevodo. And as he heard from his mother a single sentence. Matalos a todos. He opened them again, it was a very intense memory. He tried to sleep again, so he closed his eyes. Now he was a little older, in a palace full of flames. The smell of scorched vampire flesh flooded the room. In front of him was defiantly Byanak, the king of the vampires, when that phrase came back inside his head. Matalos a todos. He opened his eyes a second time. Today was the third time in his life that he heard that phrase. It was no coincidence, something bad was going to happen again. He spat on the ground. Fuck it, if you want to see Shanaris burn, don't count on me. He muttered sullenly as he fell asleep.